The unburdening of the self. There is a profound and effortless freedom found only in the moment of gentle surrender. True rest is not merely the absence of sound outside, but the quieting of the ceaseless, striving dialogue that runs within the mind. In this absolute stillness, the heavy armor of the worried self can finally be set down, unworn for a single precious night. We discover that clarity is not a distant peak we must struggle to reach, but a pure, luminous state we simply return to by the ancient gentle art of letting go. Welcome, friend, to this sacred moment of deep pause. Tonight, we gather beneath the vast, silent sky of awareness, preparing the mind and the body for the most restorative sleep. We will explore the timeless wisdom of the Zen masters, gentle secrets they forged long ago to quiet the restless heart and release the mind from its self-made prisons of anxiety, overthinking, and deep dissatisfaction. These are not merely simple tales for the evening. They are profound transmissions of insight, echoes from enlightened minds who discovered a fundamental secret: that true rest is not a destination you arrive at through effort, but a path you uncover within through stillness. The great Master Dogen once taught a truth that serves as the quiet foundation for our entire journey tonight. He said, "To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." We will explore tonight how these ancient soothing tales help us gently forget the self that ceaselessly worries, the self that habitually strives, and the self that feels compelled to carry the heavy burdens of yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears. As these profound narratives unfold in the quiet darkness, you may feel a delicate interior shift. The sharp edges of your day will begin to soften and blur. The noise that clung to your attention will start to dissipate like morning mist, and the weight you have been carrying will feel undeniably lighter with every passing moment. This journey is not one of intellectual struggle to find an answer, but a path of contemplative immersion designed to quietly dissolve the very nature of the questions themselves. So allow yourself to settle fully now. There is nothing left to do, nowhere else to be. Let your day gently recede like a distant ebbing tide. Take one final, slow, deep breath, allowing your mind to become like a wide open field on a moonlit night, receptive and still. Let us begin our journey now. The still pond and the restless stone, a koan on overthinking, deep within the secluded valleys of Mount Koya, where the air was perpetually thin and scented with cedar, stood the old monastery of Ryosanji. Here, the silence was not an absence of sound, but a palpable presence, a vast, ancient blanket that seemed to absorb all human striving and anxiety. It was within these moss-covered walls that the young monk Kensho struggled with the profound paradox of his practice. Kensho was earnest, diligent, and deeply troubled by his own effort. For hours each morning, seated rigidly on his cushion in the zendo, he attempted to attain mushin, the state of no mind. Yet, the harder he pushed against the flood of his own thoughts, the more turbulent his inner world became. His mind, he felt, was not a still pond ready to reflect the moon, but a violent sea perpetually churned by a storm he could not name. The central koan of Kensho's spiritual life was self-imposed, the relentless, exhausting attempt to stop thinking. He would enter the meditation hall, bow with impeccable reverence, and then immediately begin the inner battle. Be silent, he would command his mind. Empty yourself now, just stop. But the mind, that mischievous, tireless storyteller, would only reply with greater energy, generating endless lists of duties, anxieties about his own performance, fears of disappointing his master, and the ceaseless, looping commentary on his own failure to be still. His effort, the very energy he poured into his practice, became the restless stone thrown into the still pond, creating endless ripples that obscured the clear truth beneath. This striving, this intense desire to force an outcome, was the great teaching in disguise. One winter morning, when the cold was sharp enough to make the wooden floorboards crack, Kensho rose from his cushion with a deep, private sigh of defeat. The master, an old man named Hoko, who moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a willow branch, watched Kensho's distress without a single word. Kensho approached, his head bowed so low that his ear almost touched his shoulder, the weight of his overthinking a physical burden upon him. "Master Hoko," Kensho whispered, his voice dry with anxiety, "I strive for stillness, but my mind is a cage of noise. I try to silence it, but the trying itself creates more sound. I have thrown every tool of effort I possess at this wall of thought, yet it only grows taller. How can I reach the shore of no mind when every stroke of the paddle pushes me further out to sea?" Master Hoko continued to sweep the gravel of the small courtyard. The sound of the bamboo broom was the only disturbance in the morning air. A sound of perfect, non-striving action. He swept a small, perfect circle, paused, and looked up at Kensho. His eyes were like polished river stones, ancient and clear. "Kensho," the master said, his voice softer than the rustle of dry leaves. "You speak of the pond. Tell me, when you look at the pond, do you see the ripples, or do you see the essence of the water itself?" Kensho pondered this deeply, searching for the sophisticated, philosophical answer he knew his master deserved. I see the ripples, master. They dominate the surface, disrupting the reflection. Hoko smiled. A slow, deep unfolding of wisdom. And what happens to the ripples if you rush to the edge and furiously attempt to smooth them out with your hand? They only multiply, master. The disturbance worsens. Indeed, Hoko nodded, sweeping another quiet, perfect arc. Your anxiety is the desperate hand reaching into the water. Your thoughts are the ripples. And the fundamental nature of the water is clarity, always. Kensho, the stillness you seek, is not the absence of the ripple, but the realization that the ripple is the water. You are searching for a silence that stands separate from the sound, but the profound quiet is already contained within the sound itself. The master's words settled over Kensho like a light, almost imperceptible snow. It was not an instruction to act, but an invitation to perceive. He realized that for months he had been treating his thoughts not as a natural activity of the mind, but as an enemy to be conquered, a sickness to be cured. This inner war was the source of all his exhaustion. He had mistaken the effort of suppressing for the ease of simply observing. Hoko offered him a final, gentle instruction. Tonight, sit not to stop the thoughts, but to notice the space between them. Do not push the thoughts away. Simply decline the invitation to follow them. They are merely clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. The cloud does not stain the sky. The ripple does not destroy the water. Kensho returned to his cushion that night with a sense of quiet resignation, a surrender to the simple, almost boring reality of his own mind. He did not command silence. He did not fight the noise. Instead, he became the watchful gatekeeper, a detached observer sitting by the side of a busy, narrow road. A thought arose. I must not forget to mend my worn sandals tomorrow. Kensho did not engage it. He did not judge it as a failure of meditation. He simply watched the thought appear, linger for a moment in the light of his awareness, and then move on down the road, dissolving into the darkness. Another thought. Perhaps the master is wrong. Perhaps I am too dull to grasp this truth. Again. Kensho did not follow this thought down its path of anxiety. He recognized it as a familiar pattern, a simple echo from the past, and let it pass untouched. The practice was no longer a battle of suppression, but a quiet, sustained act of non-engagement. He was not trying to empty the pond of water, but simply refusing to throw any more stones into it. The stillness was not achieved, but simply revealed, already present, waiting patiently beneath the frantic surface movements of the mind. As the hours passed, Kensho noticed a profound shift. The thoughts did not vanish, but their power over him disintegrated. They arose bright and clear, but without the usual emotional weight or urgency. They were seen purely as ephemeral mental events. And because he did not invest his energy in fighting them, a deep, pervasive feeling of rest began to flood his body and mind. This was the true meaning of Mushin, the mind functioning freely, without the entanglement of the personal ego, without the burden of conceptual effort. The anxious, striving Kensho of the morning was replaced by a quiet observer. He discovered that the most profound clarity does not come from removing the noise, but from realizing that you are not the noise. You are the stillness that allows the noise to be. The stillness was always there, perfect and untouched, like the cold, clear depths of the still pond, reflecting the vast, silent truth of the night sky. The effort to find stillness was the only thing that had ever truly kept it away. In the gentle, perfect surrender of the effort itself, Kensho found his deepest rest. The anxious stone had finally been allowed to settle. The taste of the dewdrop, impermanence, and the freedom of now, the silence that now enfolds you, is the silence of the great truth, the truth that flows beneath all things, the ancient river that carries everything onward. This river is known as Anicca, the wisdom of impermanence. We carry within us a ceaseless, quiet suffering, not because life is difficult, but because the mind is perpetually resistant to this fundamental, flowing nature of existence. We yearn for the flower to remain eternally in full bloom, for the moment of joy to be frozen and possessed forever. For the state of peaceful rest we now enter to be an immovable, permanent fortress against the chaos of the world. Yet the deep, liberating peace of Zen does not come from finding permanence. It comes from profoundly realizing the freedom in its exact opposite, the graceful, necessary movement of all things. In the old mountains of Kyoto, where the mists clung to the ancient pine trees, and the air smelled of damp earth and quiet antiquity, lived the monk Jisan. His task was the care of the monastery's most cherished possession, a small, meticulously maintained moss garden, famous for its silent, profound beauty. Jisan was a man who understood patience, for moss does not hurry. It takes decades, even centuries, for the soft emerald green carpet to achieve its flawless texture. Yet, even in the stillness of the moss garden, Jisan struggled with the relentless march of time. His anxiety was subtle but ever present. He would spend hours removing every fallen pine needle, every stray autumn leaf, every imperfection, in a desperate, quiet attempt to preserve a moment of absolute, undisturbed perfection. He was trying to stop the seasons, one leaf at a time. One crisp morning, the air still and heavy, Jisan knelt beside a smooth, dark stone in the center of the garden. Upon the stone, a single, perfect dewdrop had formed in the night. It was a miniature world, refracting the light of the rising sun into a tiny, brilliant rainbow. It held the entire sky and the surrounding ancient forest within its perfect, crystalline globe. It was, Jisun thought, absolute, unblemished beauty. He was captivated, holding his breath, wishing with all his quiet strength that this moment, the sun, the stone, the dewdrop, could be held, suspended in eternity. He knew with the chilling certainty that comes from deep observation that the sun, already warming the stone, would claim the dewdrop within minutes. The perfection would vanish, returning its precious water to the indifferent air. And in that vanishing, Jisun felt a profound, aching sense of loss before the loss had even occurred. This was the precise nature of his quiet suffering, clinging to a fleeting moment and mourning its inevitable departure before it was truly gone. He was not experiencing the dewdrop. He was experiencing his attachment to it. As he knelt there, the soft, rhythmic footsteps of his master, Elder Sogen, sounded softly on the gravel path behind him. Sogen stopped beside Jisun, not speaking, simply observing the small scene. "Master," Jisun finally murmured, his voice heavy with the subtle weight of his anxiety. "Look at this perfect beauty. It is flawless, complete. Yet, in moments, it will be gone. I want to hold it. Why is it that the most exquisite things are always the most ephemeral? Why must we always suffer the loss of perfection?" Elder Sogen slowly raised his hand, not to touch the dewdrop, but to gesture toward the silent, overarching pines. "Jisun," the master's voice was like the soft hum of a low, distant bell, soothing and profound. "You observe the dewdrop, but you do not taste it. You want to possess the moment, but the moment itself possesses no substance that can be held. It is water vapor returned to water vapor, passing through the form of the jewel." Sogen continued, his gaze drifting from the dewdrop to the vast, unchanging moss. "Tell me, if the dewdrop remained forever, frozen and unchanging, would it still feel alive? If the sun did not rise and dissolve it, would its beauty not become merely static? A cold, dead possession. The anxiety you feel is not caused by the dewdrop's leaving, but by the ego's insistence that it must stay. You confuse perfection with permanence." This was the core teaching, delivered with the quiet, unhurried grace of a lifetime of meditation. True beauty, the master suggested, the beauty that moves the heart and grants deep rest, is entirely dependent on its transience. The dewdrop is only perfect because it is about to vanish. Its fleeting nature gives it a brilliant, sharp quality of life that a permanent object can never possess. Sogen picked up a small, smooth pebble from the path. "When the sun arrives and the dewdrop vanishes, where does it go? It does not disappear into nothingness. It simply changes form. It evaporates, becomes the moisture in the air, becomes the mist that settles on the mountainside tonight, becomes the cloud that will drop rain on the rice fields next month. It changes, Ji-san, but it does not cease to be. Life is a relentless flow of transformation, not a chain of fixed, isolated objects. Ji-san knelt in the silence, letting the master's words sink deep into the reservoir of his understanding. He realized his mind was constantly
trying to isolate moments, labeling this one good, this one bad, this one must be kept, this one must be avoided. This labeling and grasping was the source of all his striving, all his quiet exhaustion. He was trying to find an immovable island in the middle of a constantly flowing river. The master then delivered the powerful koan, the gentle, non-verbal instruction for release. Ji-san, your practice is not to stop the leaf from falling, but to become the space in which the leaf falls. Your rest is not in stopping the dewdrop from evaporating, but in witnessing the perfect, graceful act of evaporation without trying to interfere. Ji-san spent the next weeks in this new understanding, approaching his duties with a fundamental quiet shift in perspective. He still tended the moss garden, but his frantic effort was gone. He still swept the path, but the sweeping was no longer a battle against disorder. It was a rhythmic dance of accommodation with change. When a leaf fell, he no longer saw it as a threat to perfection, but as a momentary gift, a tiny flash of color and form that had completed its cycle. He honored its brief, perfect existence, and then gently allowed it to return to the earth. He began to notice the thousands of tiny, ephemeral beauties that his anxious clinging had previously obscured. He noticed the changing quality of light on the wooden veranda throughout the afternoon, never the same for 2 consecutive breaths. He noticed the unique, brief pattern of sound as the wind shifted through the different varieties of bamboo. He noticed the taste of the dewdrop on the morning air, a fresh, cold, perfect taste that he knew, even as he inhaled it, would be gone on the next exhale. And because he did not try to hold the taste, he could appreciate it fully. This was the freedom of anicca, the practice of radical acceptance of flux. The mind, when it resists impermanence, is constantly striving, struggling to build a fortress of stability out of materials that are inherently fluid. This resistance creates the tremendous tension that prevents deep rest, the tension between what is change and what the mind desires, permanence, is the definition of unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha. When Ji-san finally understood that the most profound security is found not in holding on, but in the complete release of the need to hold on, his entire being softened. His shoulders dropped, the constant subtle furrow between his brows smoothed out. He was no longer carrying the crushing, impossible burden of attempting to freeze the universe in place. He realized that letting go of a moment does not mean that the moment was meaningless. On the contrary, letting go honors the moment by allowing it to complete its own inevitable cycle. By accepting its death, he affirmed its perfect life. This acceptance was the core of non-attachment, the gentle pathway to liberation. In his final reflection before sleep each night, Jisan would imagine his mind as the vast, silent sky. The events of the day, the joys, the frustrations, the plans, the anxieties, were simply clouds. They appeared, took form, changed shape, and drifted away, their passage utterly natural and harmless. The sky did not struggle to hold on to the fluffy white cloud of morning joy, nor did it wrestle with the dark, heavy thundercloud of afternoon trouble. The sky simply allowed them to be and allowed them to pass. He found deep, unshakable rest in the realization that he, his true self, was the space of the sky, vast and untouched, and not the fleeting content of the clouds. Tonight, as you settle deeper into your own rest, feel the subtle, profound truth of this teaching settling within you. Allow the residual thoughts and emotions of your day to become those clouds. Beautiful, interesting, perhaps, but ultimately ephemeral and without real substance. Do not fight them. Do not hold them. Do not follow them. Simply watch them change, knowing that in the quiet acceptance of their flowing nature, you find the complete, effortless rest that is your birthright. Let everything flow, and in the space you create by letting go, true, profound rest will find you, the gate of no gate, the Zen of everyday action. The deep, effortless rest we seek is often obscured by the common illusion that spiritual progress requires grand gestures, dramatic renunciations, or isolated, intense periods of meditation. The mind, in its seeking nature, always wants a separate, extraordinary place to achieve enlightenment. Yet the great Zen masters taught the profound truth of the gate of no gate, that the path to awakening is found precisely within the most mundane, repetitive, and often overlooked actions of our daily life. The wisdom is encapsulated in the concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing or effortless action. This does not mean laziness or inaction. It means doing everything with a mind so utterly present and non-striving that the action flows through you, rather than being forced out of a willful, burdened ego. In the secluded, silent mountain temple of Eiheiji, where the practices are as rigorous as the winter cold, lived an elderly monk named Genshin. Genshin's duty was not glorious. He was the tenzo, the monastery cook, responsible for the preparation of the simple, seasonal vegetarian meals for the hundreds of monks. His kitchen was a place of constant, quiet work, chopping, stirring, cleaning, and preparing. For years, a young, intensely philosophical monk named Ai-jun,
who spent all his time in the library studying the great sutras, observed Genshin with a mixture of respect and pity. Aijun felt that Genshin was wasting his profound potential on the endless, repetitive tasks of the kitchen. One afternoon, Aijun came to the kitchen. Genshin was meticulously cleaning a large iron pot, scrubbing the soot and oil with a quiet, tireless energy. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic scrape of the bamboo brush. June, unable to contain
His frustration with the mundane, asked Genshin, "Master, you have studied the way for 50 years. You could be teaching the deep meaning of the Diamond Sutra or guiding us through the most complex koans. Yet, here you are, year after year, scrubbing pots. Is this truly the highest expression of the enlightened life? Where is the great enlightenment to be found in the scrubbing of burnt rice from a pot?" Genshin paused, not looking up from the pot. The brush remained suspended for a moment in the air, but the awareness in his posture did not break. He was totally present with the pot, the brush, and the warm, soapy water. "Aijun," Genshin replied, his voice calm and utterly matter-of-fact. "You speak of the great enlightenment as if it were a jewel hidden in the vast, distant plains, separate from the hand that holds this brush. But I tell you, if you seek the way outside of this very moment, outside of this very kitchen, outside of the simple, honest work before you, you will never find it." He lifted the pot, now spotlessly clean and gleaming, and held it up to the light. "You ask where the great enlightenment is found in the scrubbing of the pot. It is found in the scrubbing itself. It is found in the perfect, non-striving attention given to the task. When I scrub this pot, I am not thinking of the sutras I could be teaching, nor of the meal I must prepare next. I am simply the act of scrubbing. There is no separation between Genshin and the scrubbing, between the subject and the object. There is only the flow of pure action." He set the clean pot down. When the mind is totally immersed in the action, with no anxiety about the result, no distraction from the past, and no projection into the future, then the mind is Mushin, the no mind. And in that state of perfect total presence, the entire universe is revealed in the texture of the iron, the warmth of the water, and the scent of the soap. Genshin then shared a story that embodied this truth of doing without doing. He spoke of the famous monk Banzan, who was once walking through a market town, surrounded by the usual cacophony of commerce and crowds. A novice monk, accompanying him, was anxious about maintaining his inner stillness in such a chaotic environment. Suddenly, Banzan stopped before a butcher's stall. The butcher, a large, loud man, was holding a cleaver. A customer approached and asked, "Butcher, give me the finest, most tender cut of meat you have." The butcher did not pause.
With one swift, effortless, perfectly executed movement, he sliced a piece of meat from the hanging carcass. The cut was perfect, clean and quick. The butcher handed it over and declared, "Here, my friend, this cut is perfect. It is the finest there is. There is no second piece." Banzan immediately turned to the novice monk, his eyes alight with profound realization. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "The butcher has found the way. When he speaks, he is utterly present. When he cuts the meat, he is the
Single, perfect cut. He does not hesitate with doubt, nor is he distracted by the noise. He simply is the cutting. There is no second piece, no second thought, no distraction, no lack of total commitment to the moment. The great enlightenment, Genshin explained to Aijun, is often hidden in these small, single moments of total presence. It is not the outcome of the action that matters, but the quality of the attention that we bring to it. If you seek the way only in the library becomes a distraction. If you seek the way only in the quiet mountain cave, the cave becomes a prison. Aijun listened, his own intellectual striving suddenly feeling heavy and hollow. He realized that his problem was that he saw his spiritual practice as a separate category of life, something he did after the dishes were cleaned, after the tasks were finished, after the effort of the day was done. He had created a split between his ordinary life and his spiritual life. Genshin looked at the sincere but weary young monk. "You exhaust yourself, Aijun, because you constantly try to escape the present moment in search of a better or more spiritual moment. But the truth is, this breath is the only moment of life you will ever have. The way is found in this breath, in this sweeping, in this drinking of tea. When you drink tea, simply drink. When you walk, simply walk. This total immersion is the gate of no gate. There is no barrier to pass through because the gate itself is the simple, non-dualistic action of your life." Aijun bowed deeply and silently left the kitchen. He did not immediately abandon his sutras, but he fundamentally changed how he read them. He no longer sought abstract concepts or intellectual mastery. He sought the total, non-striving presence of Genshin's scrubbing brush in the simple black ink on the page. And when he next cleaned his own room, he did not rush through the task with his mind already planning the next reading session. He became the gentle sweeping of the dust, the crisp folding of the thin blanket, the quiet placement of the single flower in its vase. He discovered, for the first time, a profound, effortless rest, not after the work was done, but within the flow of the work itself. This total immersion in the mundane is the deepest rest the mind can know. It is the peace that comes when the seeking, striving self vanishes entirely into the simple, beautiful necessity of the present moment. This is the Zen of everyday action,
an inner silence that is so complete it embraces the noise of the world and transforms it into the sound of the way. Allow the gentle wisdom of this realization to settle deep within you now. Let the burdens of your unfinished tasks, your to-do list, and your planning mind gently recede. You have only this breath. You have only this moment of profound rest. Do not strive for sleep. Simply become the perfect, non-striving act of resting. The weight of the empty bowl, dissatisfaction, and the prison of
desire in the quiet, internal landscape of the searching mind. A deep and pervasive sense of dissatisfaction is the most common affliction. This condition is known in the Buddhist tradition as dukkha, often translated not just as suffering, but as a subtle, chronic unsatisfactoriness, a feeling that something is perpetually missing, slightly off, or incomplete. The source of this unease is craving or desire, tanha, the mind's relentless grip on what is not present, or its desperate clinging to what is already present and fleeting. This craving, this constant mental striving, is the heaviest burden we carry, and its release is the path to effortless rest. In a small, impoverished temple nestled in the foothills of Mount Hiei lived a Zen master named Etsu. Etsu owned almost nothing. His possessions consisted of a single worn robe, a meditation cushion, and a simple wooden begging bowl. This bowl was his only physical connection to the world, for it sustained his life, receiving the meager offerings of rice and vegetables from the villagers. One evening, a wealthy merchant named Kageyama came to the temple seeking advice on how to find peace. Kageyama was a man consumed by his own success. He owned warehouses filled with silk, vast lands, and a home full of beautiful objects. Yet his face was perpetually etched with the lines of worry and exhaustion. He was a man who had everything, but felt he possessed nothing of true worth. Kageyama bowed low, his silk robes rustling, and addressed the master. "Master Etsu, I have built an empire, yet I find no peace. When I achieve one goal, my mind immediately leaps to the next. When I acquire a fine piece of porcelain, I instantly worry about its safety. I am driven by desire, and yet desire brings me only restlessness and anxiety. I have tried to fill myself with wealth and pleasure, but I remain stubbornly, desperately empty. Tell me, how can I finally fill the bowl of my heart so that it remains full and still?" Etsu looked at the merchant, his gaze gentle and clear, and slowly picked up his own simple, empty wooden bowl. "Kageyama," the master said, holding the bowl in the moonlight, "you suffer from a fundamental misunderstanding. You believe the purpose of the bowl is to be filled, but the deepest wisdom of the bowl is in its emptiness." The merchant looked puzzled. "But master, if it is empty, how can it sustain you?"
bowl sustains me precisely because it is empty and ready to receive. Etsu explained. If I were to glue a jewel to the bottom of this bowl and then spend my days worrying that someone would steal the jewel, would I not starve? The bowl would be full of a fixed, precious object, but it would have lost its fundamental function, its ability to receive the nourishment of the present moment. It would have become a prison of possession rather than a vessel of life. Etsu continued, his voice soft yet penetrating. Your life, Kageyama, is filled with 1,000 jewels. Your
wealth, your accomplishments, your possessions. But your heart, like a bowl full of jewels, can receive no nourishment. You spend all your energy clinging to what you have and craving what you lack. This grasping is a physical and mental tension that never allows you to rest. The master then delivered the core truth of the teaching. The weight you carry is not the weight of your possessions, but the weight of your attachment to them. It is the weight of the endless invisible rope that your mind throws out to try and secure every fleeting moment of joy and every object of desire. Etsu shared a small classic koan. The Buddha was once asked, "What have you gained from meditation?" The Buddha replied, "Nothing." Then he was asked, "Then what have you lost?" The Buddha replied, "Anger, anxiety, fear, and dissatisfaction." This is the wisdom of the empty bowl, Kageyama, Etsu said. The path to peace is not in gaining more, but in losing the compulsive need to gain at all. The mind stops running only when it realizes that the source of true fulfillment is not out there in the next acquisition or achievement, but in here, in the quiet, profound realization that you are already complete. Kageyama sat with this truth, feeling the weight of his own relentless striving for the first time. He realized his possessions did not bring him joy. They brought him the exhausting task of guarding them. His success did not bring him peace. It brought him the terrifying fear of failure. He was living as a slave to his own desires, constantly running a race with a finish line that perpetually moved further away. Etsu offered him a practical, gentle exercise for the merchant to take into his daily life, a practice of deep, contemplative release. Go home, Kageyama, and observe your possessions. Do not judge them. Simply hold one object, a silk scarf, a fine piece of silver, and ask your heart 3 questions, whispered softly into the silence. Do I truly possess this object, or does this object possess my peace? What anxiety will I suffer if this object is lost or broken?
can I find gratitude for this object's presence without requiring its permanence. The moment you realize that all things are inherently fleeting, that the beautiful silk will wear out, the shining silver will tarnish, and the wealth will pass. That is the moment you can finally relax your grip. When you stop trying to fix the ephemeral nature of things, the heart finds its deepest, most effortless rest. Kageyama left the temple not with a plan to sell his empire, but with a simple, profound shift in perspective. He began to approach his wealth not as a fixed security to be guarded, but as a flowing current to be used skillfully and gently in the present moment. He continued his work, but the quality of his attention changed completely. The intense, anxious striving was replaced by a quiet, non-attached effort, an action free from the desperate need for a specific, permanent outcome. When he drank his tea, he simply enjoyed the warm cup in his hands, not the expensive porcelain. When he walked through his vast gardens, he did not worry about the weeds that would inevitably grow tomorrow. He simply saw the vibrant, fleeting green of the leaves today. He was no longer trying to fill the bowl of his heart with external objects. He was simply allowing the emptiness of the bowl to be revealed as the perfect state of readiness and peace. This is the great secret of the weight of the empty bowl. True contentment is not achieved by gaining what you desire, but by letting go of the desire itself. It is the realization that your entire self, your entire existence, is already complete, already whole, and requires no external fulfillment. As you settle deeper now, feel the quiet tension of your own unspoken desires, the craving for a different past, a guaranteed future, or a different state of mind. Breathe into that tension, and with every exhale, gently, profoundly, release the grip. Allow the bowl of your mind to become vast and empty, ready to receive only the simple, perfect peace of this very moment of rest. You are complete now. You are enough now. Let the striving mind finally rest. The road of many candles, trust, shared joy, and right view. The journey toward profound inner rest is often conceived as a solitary inward withdrawal. Yet, the deepest peace the masters teach is not merely found in personal isolation, but in the expansion of the heart, in the virtues of trust, shared joy, and the unwavering clarity of right view. This expansion transforms the inner stillness from a fragile possession into a boundless, resilient state that embraces the world. The core of this teaching is encapsulated in the Buddha's timeless wisdom. Happiness never decreases by being shared. This is the practice of mudita, or sympathetic joy, the profound ability to take genuine pleasure in the good fortune, success, and happiness of others,
free from the shadow of envy or comparison, far to the north, where the harsh winds often swept down from the high passes, was a small kingdom constantly under the threat of invasion. Its general, a man known for his military prowess, was nevertheless burdened by a deep-seated anxiety about the strength of his own army. They possessed the weapons and the training, but they lacked the essential unifying force, unshakable belief in their own victory. The general sought counsel from the court's resident Zen master, an unassuming old woman named Chio. He found her not in the temple, but quietly tending a small vegetable patch behind the barracks, her hands in the cold, dark earth. "Master Chio," the general began, his voice strained by worry.
"We face a formidable enemy. My soldiers are brave, but their confidence is brittle. When they look at the enemy's numbers, a subtle doubt creeps into their eyes. They lack the right view, the unwavering belief that the path we walk is just and unshaveable. How can I
Give them this inner conviction? How can I light the flame of hope in thousands of hearts when my own flickers with fear? Chio stopped digging, dusted the soil from her hands, and looked at the general. Her eyes held the same vast patience as the winter earth itself. "General," she said softly, "you are asking how to force 1,000 candles to ignite. But you forget the fundamental law of light. You do not force it. You simply share it. You do not possess confidence. You become the vessel through which it flows." Chio then led the general to a dark storage hut. Inside, she lit a single, small, humble candle. The single flame was tiny, yet its light immediately pushed back the darkness in the corner of the small room. "Look, General," she instructed. "This single candle is your own heart, your own vision of victory. It is strong, clear, and perfectly still. Now, bring your first soldier." The general, curious, brought a hesitant young recruit who was known for his crippling self-doubt. Chio took the small, humble candle and with a silent, graceful movement held it to the wick of the recruit's unlit candle. The second candle immediately sprang to life. "Tell me, General," Chio asked, "has the life of the first candle been shortened? Has its light diminished in the slightest by sharing its flame?" The general watched, mesmerized. "No, Master. It is exactly the same. The light is doubled, yet the source remains whole." "Indeed," Shio affirmed. "This is the essence of shared confidence. And mudita, your confidence, your faith in the right view is not a finite resource to be guarded. It is a flame
when you light another's candle, when you authentically share your belief in their strength, when you genuinely celebrate their small individual victories, your own light does not fade. It is amplified. Chio explained that the soldiers' doubt was not a failing of their character, but the residue of fear from living a life of isolation and striving. The moment the general's confident, quiet faith touched their own hesitant hope, their inner candle was lit. Your right view, Chio concluded, is the recognition that peace and success are not one in scarcity. True, profound achievement is a shared ecosystem. When one soldier finds the quiet confidence to stand straight, that confidence nourishes the man beside him. When one heart is at rest, that rest gently settles the heart nearby. The general took the wisdom back to his camp. He did not give a grand, rousing speech. Instead, he began to practice mudita, sympathetic joy and shared trust, in small, powerful moments. He stopped criticizing small failures and started celebrating small acts of courage and excellence. He began to share meals with his soldiers, listening not for their complaints, but for the quiet dreams and strengths he knew lay dormant within them. When one soldier performed a complex maneuver flawlessly, the general would not just commend him, he would turn to the man next to him and say, "Observe this man's skill. His success is now part of our collective strength." The change in the army was not sudden or violent, but a gradual, quiet blossoming. The atmosphere shifted. Doubt began to dissolve, not because it was fought, but because it was steadily overshadowed by a pervasive, shared sense of inner conviction. The soldiers no longer fought in isolation, driven by individual fear or glory. They fought as a unified force, resting in the deep, shared knowledge that their right view, their belief in the integrity of their purpose and the strength of their comrades, was the unbreakable foundation of their campaign. Their success became inevitable not because of superior numbers, but because of a superior state of mind, a mind at rest, free from the corrosive anxiety of isolated striving. This ancient teaching offers a profound template for our own rest. Our anxiety often arises from the feeling that we are alone, that our inner resources of strength, patience, or peace are scarce and must be hoarded. We fear that if we share our peace, it will diminish. But the Zen masters teach us to be the flame that is never shortened. To find a deep, stabilizing peace, we must allow our stillness to flow outward. When you feel compassion for another striving, your own striving softens. When you feel joy for another's success, your own dissatisfaction evaporates. This generosity of spirit is not an altruistic sacrifice. It is the most profound and effective strategy for securing your own peace. The shared light burns brighter, illuminating the darkness for everyone,
including yourself. As you drift now, feel the quiet certainty of this right view settling in your heart. You are not a separate, fearful island. You are part of a vast, interconnected current of life. Let your inner light shine, knowing that its power is not reduced by being shared, but is confirmed and strengthened. Relax your mind now and rest in the knowledge that your peace is a quiet, powerful light that sustains not only you, but the world around you. Let your candle burn bright, still, and completely at ease. The sound of one hand, clapping beyond dualities, as your body sinks heavier into the soft cradle of rest. We turn our awareness now to the most subtle and often overlooked source of the mind's ceaseless striving, the habit of duality. This is the mind's core mechanism of division, the relentless sorting of the universe into paired opposites, good and bad, gain and loss, light and dark, self and other. The very effort to find rest often creates its opposite, because the mind defines rest as the state that stands in opposition to anxiety. But the greatest Zen teachers point to a truth that exists before the division, a boundless reality that transcends the limits of conceptual thought. This profound, unifying realization is often communicated not through sermon or scripture, but through the perfect, unresolvable riddle known as the koan. Tonight, we rest in the expansive silence of the most famous of these pointers. What is the sound of one hand clapping? This question is a gentle, powerful hammer designed not to break your mind, but to shatter the conceptual framework that holds your anxious striving in place. It asks you to step beyond the need for words, logic, or intellectual resolution, and simply be in the space where logic dissolves. In the old, mist-shrouded temple of Kenninji, a young, deeply intellectual monk named Junsei devoted his life to meditation, yet he found no peace. His inner world was a constant battleground of definitions. He obsessed over the concept of enlightenment, defining it sharply against the darkness of his own perceived delusion. He saw his efforts as good and his failures as bad. He sought the profound silence of Zazen, but felt it was always being corrupted by the noise of his thoughts. This dualistic mind, this compulsion to separate and define, became his deepest source of suffering, for it meant he was never truly whole. He was always standing on one side, perpetually striving to escape to the other. He sought guidance from his master, old Kyoshin, who sat quietly beside the small, perfectly raked moss garden.
Master Kyoshin, Junsei began, his voice tense with intellectual exertion. I seek the perfect, unbroken silence. But when I sit, the world assaults me with noise, the sound of the wind in the bamboo, the bell ringing for mealtime, the endless chatter of my own brain. How can I possibly find the supreme, non-dualistic reality when I am constantly trapped in the duality of sound and silence? Kyoshin opened his hand and slowly closed it into a fist, then opened it again, repeating the action with quiet, rhythmic simplicity. He did this 3 times, and then smiled gently. Junsei, the master asked, "What is the sound of 2 hands clapping?" "Why, the sound is clap, master," Junsei replied, feeling foolish. "Precisely," said Kyoshin. "Now tell me, what is the sound of 1 hand clapping?" The question settled over Junsei like an unbearable weight. His mind immediately leaped into action, trying to solve it as a mathematical equation. Is it the sound of the hand moving through the air? Is it the inner silence of the moment before the strike? Is it a metaphorical sound, the sound of the ultimate truth? He spent the next 3 months consumed by the koan. He approached the master with elaborate, intellectual solutions, reciting paragraphs from sutras, weaving complex philosophical arguments. "Master," he proposed one morning, "the sound of 1 hand clapping must be the inner voice of Buddha nature, the unmanifest sound that precedes all manifestation." Kyoshin merely shook his head, his face impassive. "That is the sound of 2 hands clapping in the library, Junsei. It is a concept. It is separation. Go and listen again. Listen with your whole body, not just your clever mind." Junsei redoubled his effort, his frustration growing. Sharper, he tried to mimic the silence of the hand. He tried to visualize a sound that was not sound. He became fiercely attached to the idea of finding the answer, believing that the answer was a thing he could grasp and possess. He was so busy striving for the resolution that he missed the profound peace that lay beneath the striving itself. His effort was simply the sound of 2 hands clapping, the hand of the searching self striking against the palm of the desired answer. One night, exhausted and defeated, he went for a walk in the deep mountain forest. The moon was hidden behind heavy clouds, and the darkness was absolute. Junsei sat down by a small stream, deciding to abandon the koan entirely. He felt he was a complete failure, utterly incapable of transcending duality. As he sat there, utterly surrendered to his own defeat, the forest suddenly began to speak. A soft, insistent rain began to fall. Junsei heard the faint tap, tap, tap of the water striking the broad green leaves of the forest floor. He heard the deep, gentle gurgle of the stream flowing over the stones, a constant, patient sound. He heard the faint, distant hoot of an owl. And within all these sounds, he realized, was the perfect silence that held them. The silence was not the opposite of the sound. The silence was the space in which the sound could occur. The sound did not destroy the silence. It only served to define the vastness of the silence around it. He realized
That sound and silence were not two separate, warring entities. They were two faces of the same seamless reality. In that moment of total, non-striving acceptance, the koan shattered, not into an answer, but into a feeling, a pure, non-verbal realization that required no words, no concepts, and no dualistic explanation. Junsei realized that the sound of one hand clapping is the sound of everything, experienced before the mind begins to divide it into categories. The sound of one hand clapping is the rain falling on the leaf. It is the hushed presence of the vast, indifferent mountain. It is the flow of the stream, utterly present, asking for nothing. It is the non-striving of the self when it releases the effort to be good or enlightened. When he returned to Master Kyoshin the next morning, the master did not need to ask for the answer. He simply looked at Junsei's eyes, which were now calm, clear, and perfectly at rest. The striving dualistic tension had vanished. "You have heard it, haven't you, Junsei?" the master whispered. "I have not heard it, master," Junsei replied, his voice quiet with an inner certainty. "I am it." The master nodded. The effort to find the sound was the great obstacle. The sound of two hands clapping is the anxious mind trying to separate rest from striving, self from other. But the sound of one hand clapping is the truth of non-separation. It is the realization that the life you are living is not separate from the enlightenment you seek. It is all one vast, seamless reality. This lesson of non-duality is the deepest medicine for the mind struggling to find rest. Your anxiety is caused by the mind separating your current state from your desired state. You are tense and you strive for relaxation. You are thinking and you strive for emptiness. You feel fear and you strive for courage. But what if the state you seek is not separate from the state you are in? What if the sound of one hand clapping is the perfect, complete totality of this very moment, with all its sound, all its silence, all its tension, and all its possibility of rest, contained within its own unity? The Zen tradition encourages us to look at the ultimate dualities that cause the most profound anxiety, life and death. The dualistic mind sees them as an absolute break, a chasm, but the enlightened view sees them as the two necessary, non-separate hands of a single clap. One cannot exist without the other. To be afraid of one is to be unable to fully embrace the other. When you accept the inevitability of change, of the cycle of the flow, the tension between life and death, between holding on and letting go, dissolves, and the deepest, most resilient peace is revealed. As you settle now, let the koan become your pillow. You do not need to solve it. You simply need to become it. Release the compulsion to separate your worries from your rest. Release the need to fight the thoughts that arise. Do not label the thought bad and the silence good. The thought is merely a wave. The silence is the ocean. They are not separate. They are the same water. Rest now in the vast, unifying truth of non-duality. The peace you seek is not beyond your current reality. It is the pure essence of your current reality, waiting to be revealed when the dividing mind finally takes its rest. Allow your entire consciousness to become the silent, encompassing space that holds all the sounds and all the stillness of this night. Let the sound of one hand clapping be the deep, quiet rhythm of your own heart at perfect, absolute rest, the mirror that knows no dust, the essence of our true nature. As you settle deeper into the non-dualistic awareness, we turn our attention to the heart of the Zen teaching, the inherent, pristine perfection of our own nature, known as Buddha nature. The search for rest and enlightenment often feels like a long, arduous journey to acquire something new, to become a better, perfected self. But the masters tell us that the truth is infinitely simpler. Our fundamental nature is already whole, clear, and utterly complete. It is merely obscured by the dust of delusion, fear, and habit. This profound realization is best embodied in the story of the fifth patriarch, Hongren, and the contest for the succession of the Zen lineage, which led to the famous confrontation between the chief monk Shenju and the humble, illiterate kitchen warrior Huineng. At the monastery of East Mountain, the aging fifth patriarch sought a successor who truly understood the subtle, core teaching of the way. He asked his disciples to compose a verse that would demonstrate their grasp of Buddha nature. The chief monk, Shenshu, was learned, respected, and expected by all to inherit the mantle. His verse was carefully written and posted on the wall of the corridor at midnight. Shenshu's verse read, "The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror stand. Take care to wipe it all the time, and let no dust alight." This verse was praised by the other monks as a clear demonstration of diligent practice. It articulated the belief that enlightenment is achieved through constant effort, the relentless daily struggle to keep the mind pure, free from any stain of thought, desire, or error. It suggested a perpetual battle against the self, a continuous process of anxious wiping and striving. The fifth patriarch, however, saw the subtle flaw in this approach. He knew that any practice based on relentless striving and a rigid separation between the clear self and the dusty self would ultimately lead to exhaustion, attachment to effort, and an enduring sense of separation. A few days later, a simple, uneducated lay worker named Huining, who spent his days pounding rice in the kitchen, heard the verse. Huining could not read or write, so he asked a monk to write his own response next to Shenxiu's. Huining's verse was the perfect, effortless articulation of the truth of non-duality and inherent completion. It read, "Bodhi originally has no tree. The bright mirror also has no stand. Originally, there is not a single thing. Where can the dust alight?" The moment the monks read Huining's words, a profound, chilling silence fell over the corridor. Huining's verse utterly shattered the dichotomy created by Shenxiu's effort. Shenxiu believed in the existence of the mirror, the existence of the stand, and the existence of the dust, all fixed, separate entities that required a lifetime of striving to keep them apart. His practice was predicated on constant tension. Huineng, the unlettered kitchen hand, revealed the profound, effortless truth. If everything is interconnected emptiness, sunyata, if our true nature is vast, unmanifested void, then there is no fixed mirror to be dusted, and no separate clinging dust to be wiped away. There is no dusty self, and no pure self. There is only the seamless reality of what is. The striving itself was revealed to be the dust. The fifth patriarch immediately understood. Huineng had not just demonstrated intellectual understanding, he had shown the ultimate realization of effortless being. He revealed that the clarity we seek is not something we achieve through strenuous work, but something we simply reveal by letting go of the need to work so hard. The master called Huineng to his room that night and quietly passed on the robes and the dharma, making the humble rice pounder the sixth patriarch. This story offers a profound teaching for those seeking deep rest. Your struggle to find peace, your anxiety about not being spiritual enough, or not meditating correctly, or not being good enough, is the sound of Shenxiu's endless wiping. It is the anxious self struggling to polish a mirror that is already fundamentally clear. The true source of weariness is not the challenges of the world, but the constant, invisible tension of the mind trying to control its own state. When you strive to be calm, you define yourself as not calm, and the effort generates more agitation. Huineng's wisdom invites you to ask, where can the dust alight? Where is the place of separation between your tired self and your rested self? There is none. Your essence, your Buddha nature, is like the vast, boundless sky, clouds of worry, storms of regret, and specks of doubt may drift through it, but they never, for a single moment, change the fundamental nature of the sky. The sky is always clear, always whole, always vast. It does not need to struggle to be clear. It is clarity itself. Your practice now is not to fight the dust, but to rest in the reality of the sky. Release the constant mental broom of self-criticism. Stop the anxious polishing of the self. Allow the thoughts, the feelings, the imperfections of this moment to simply be the ephemeral dust they are. Do not engage them. Do not judge them. Simply recognize that they are passing through an awareness that is perfectly vast, untouched, and whole. Your true, restful nature requires no maintenance, no protection, and no effort to acquire. It is the peace that is already here, waiting beneath the striving. Rest now in the effortless realization of your own inherent, undiminished, clear Buddha nature. You are already the bright mirror. Let the wiping hand finally rest, the gentle path of loving kindness, extending the inner stillness. As the deep currents of peace begin to anchor you, pulling you down toward the profound stillness of the true self, we turn our awareness to the next essential teaching on the path to restful liberation. We have seen that peace is found in non-striving, in accepting the flow of impermanence, and in realizing the inherent clarity of our own nature. But this stillness, if kept in isolation, can become cold, brittle, and easily shattered by the smallest disturbance of the external world. The Zen masters understood that true, resilient, and boundless peace must be extended. It is not a fortress to be guarded, but a boundless reservoir whose waters flow outward to nourish the world. This is the practice of metta, or loving kindness, the gentle path of wishing well to all beings, and most fundamentally, to yourself. It is the realization that inner rest is not a retreat from the world, but an overflow that naturally softens the heart, transforming every interaction into an opportunity for quiet truth. The Buddha taught that all fear and anxiety ultimately stem from the belief in a separate, isolated self. When we perceive ourselves as fundamentally separate from others, we enter into a constant state of comparison, judgment, and defensiveness. We strive to protect our own fragile peace from the perceived threats of others' noise, desires, and imperfections. This defensive posture is a tremendous quiet source of our daily exhaustion. Imagine a monk who has mastered the art of zazen, who can sit for hours without the movement of a single muscle, whose breath is so refined it is almost imperceptible. He is a master of inner stillness, a monument of personal tranquility. Yet when he leaves his cushion and encounters the chaotic, messy, and loud reality of human existence, he often finds his carefully constructed peace dissolving in moments. Such a monk was named Junrei. Junrei had spent the last decade in the secluded mountain monastery of Tenryuji, practicing with fierce, unwavering discipline. He had grasped the subtle truths of non-duality and impermanence. He was the chief disciple, renowned for the clarity of his understanding and the depth of his meditative absorption. But Junrei held his peace tightly, almost possessively. He saw the flaws of the other monks with a sharp, judgmental eye, seeing their hesitations, their distractions, and their noisiness as obstacles to the pristine, silent perfection he believed the monastery should embody. His quiet peace was often tinged with a subtle arrogance, the pride of one who believes he has ascended above the messy striving of the common world. He had mastered the silence within his own cell, but he had yet to master the compassion required to hold that silence steady amidst the sound of other struggle. Junrei's most profound test came in the form of a fellow monk named Kojiro. Kojiro was the epitome of human imperfection. He was perpetually clumsy, always dropping his bowl during meals, forever arriving late to the morning meditation, and possessed a ceaseless, nervous energy that manifested as endless, low-level complaining about the cold, the food, or his own inability to focus. Kojiro was the restless stone that Junrei could not tolerate near his still pond. Junrei often found his own deep concentration shattered simply by the sound of Kojiro's restless sighing or the faint clack of his misplaced wooden sandals in the hallway. Junrei saw Kojiro not as a fellow seeker, but as a flaw in the beautiful tapestry of the monastery's stillness. The truth was, Kojiro was the perfect mirror for Junrei's unresolved tension, the tension between his isolated inner ideal and the generous acceptance required by the outer reality. One frigid afternoon, Junrei found his master, Elder Teshin, warming his hands by a small charcoal brazier in the quiet annex. Junrei, his voice low and tight with controlled frustration, bowed deeply. "Master Teshin," Junrei began, the words escaping in a rushed whisper. "I believe I understand the truth of the mirror that knows no dust. I have relinquished my striving, and my inner self is often clear and whole. Yet my peace is shattered daily by the constant small annoyances of the community, most profoundly by the presence of Kojiro. His noise, his lack of discipline, his ceaseless complaining, they are like a persistent fly I cannot swat away. He breaks my focus. He disturbs my stillness. He forces me to judge and withdraw. Tell me, Master, how can I achieve true, impenetrable peace when the external world insists on dragging me back into the muck of imperfection?" Master Teshin listened patiently, his eyes fixed on the slow, quiet burning of the charcoal. The master allowed the silence to settle between them for a long time, the only sound the soft, rhythmic tick of the dying embers. Finally, the master spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Junrei, you seek impenetrable peace, but you confuse it with an isolated fortress. You believe you must build a wall to keep the outside world's imperfections from staining your clarity. But I tell you, any peace that must be defended is not peace at all. It is a fragile,
personal achievement, resting on the condition that the world must remain quiet and perfect for you. He paused, then delivered the core teaching on metta. Your stillness must be tested by the uninvited guest. Kojiro is not an obstacle to your peace, Junrei. He is the necessary key to its deepest expression. He is the sandpaper that reveals the final, hidden grain of your own resistance. You have released the striving to be perfect. But you have not yet released the judgment of imperfection in others. This judgment is the last, quiet, and deepest form of self-attachment. And it is the true source of your renewed exhaustion. The master picked up a small, smooth, cold stone from the floor. Imagine your inner stillness is like this stone. If you keep it wrapped in a soft cloth and never expose it to the air, it will remain pristine. Yes, but it will be cold and dead. When you expose it to the wind, the sun, and the elements, the very things that seek to change it, it becomes warm and alive, its essence confirmed and strengthened by its contact with reality. The practice of metta, of loving kindness, is this exposure, Junrei. It is the practice of softening the heart until it no longer resists the truth of Kojiro's imperfection. You do not extend kindness because Kojiro deserves it, or because it will change him. You extend kindness because the act of resistance, the act of judgment, wounds your own peace far more deeply than Kojiro's clumsiness ever could. The master gave Junrei a specific, quiet instruction. Tonight, Junrei, do not sit in meditation to find silence. Sit only to practice metta for Kojiro. Do not begin with a wish for his enlightenment or his perfection. Begin with a deeper, simpler prayer. May Kojiro be free from suffering. When you hear the sound of his nervous sighing, do not recoil in judgment. Ask yourself, what deep, personal
Pain must be running beneath that sigh to make it so incessant. When he trips, do not feel superiority. Ask, what fear of inadequacy is he wrestling with? And how is it manifesting as clumsiness? See his noise not as an attack on your peace, but as a manifestation of his struggle. Junrei took this instruction back to his cell, feeling a sudden, strange sense of vulnerability. It was easier, he realized, to sit rigidly and be still than it was to actively soften his heart toward the person who most aggravated him. That night, he sat on his cushion and tried the practice. Immediately, his mind rebelled. He is selfish. He is lazy. He is the one who needs to change for me to rest. Junrei recognized these thoughts as the voice of his own defensive ego. The small, grasping self fighting to maintain its isolated purity.
He gently, profoundly released the thoughts, imagining them as dry leaves drifting away on a cold stream. He focused his awareness entirely on Kojiro, who slept in a small cell 2 doors down. He began the quiet, rhythmic recitation of the loving-kindness phrases, whispering them in the language of his heart. May Kojiro be safe from inner and outer harm. May Kojiro be free from his anxiety. May Kojiro be at ease. At first, the words felt dry, mechanical, and utterly insincere. But Junrei persisted, not with striving, but with patience. The gentle, sustained effort of non-judgmental repetition. He did not force the feeling. He simply created the space for the kindness to arise. After an hour, the mechanical nature of the practice began to dissolve, replaced by a strange, almost painful opening in his chest. He saw not the irritating monk, but the human being behind the facade, the seeker who struggled just as fiercely, perhaps more fiercely than he did, but whose struggle manifested as noise rather than controlled silence. He saw Kojiro's shame when he dropped his rice bowl. He saw the genuine flickering desire for acceptance in his eyes. He saw that Kojiro's noisiness was simply the visible dukkha, the deep unsatisfactoriness that he, Junrei, had merely managed to push inward and make quiet. They were, in essence, not separate in their fundamental human struggle. In that moment of profound realization, the moment of non-separation, the wall Hunrei had built around his personal stillness dissolved completely. When his heart softened toward Kojiro, a strange, beautiful thing happened to his own stillness. It did not break. It expanded. His peace was no longer a personal shield, but a shared atmosphere. The act of releasing judgment against Kojiro was the final critical act of releasing the judgment against himself. The inner pressure to always be perfect, silent, and superior. The judgment of others and the self-criticism of the self are always two sides of the same clinging coin. The next morning, Junrei woke up with a profound lightness he had never known before. He encountered Kojiro in the hallway. Kojiro stumbled slightly on the worn floorboards, catching himself with a nervous, loud cough. Junrei did not flinch. He did not tighten. He simply looked at Kojiro and with a gentle, true smile, nodded a simple, quiet acknowledgement. It was a smile free of judgment, a smile of shared humanity. Kojiro, sensing the change, looked up in surprise. His nervous energy momentarily paused. He simply returned the nod and passed by, the air between them clear and soft, rather than thick with silent criticism. Junrei proceeded to the zendo, and for the first time, his meditation was not a struggle for perfection, but a boundless, effortless act of resting in the pervasive peace of his own open heart. He realized
that the peace that survives the turmoil of the outside world is the only true peace. The stillness that is strengthened by compassion is the only stillness that is truly resilient. The gentle path of loving kindness is the final, essential practice of non-attachment. The letting go of the need for others to be different for your own sake. Tonight, as the soothing waves of rest wash over you, let this final, beautiful realization settle in your heart. True, deep rest is not a turning away from the world's noise, but an unconditional embrace of its reality. If any thought arises now, a criticism, a worry, a moment of self-judgment, do not fight it. Do not recoil. Gently, profoundly, extend the same metta to the sound of your own inner struggle. If your mind is complaining about an event of the day, do not condemn the complaint. Simply say to your own tired, struggling mind, "May this part of me that strives and worries be at ease. May this part of me that judges be free from its fear." The gentle path of loving kindness is the final, exquisite rest of the striving self, allowing the boundless, shared, and unbreakable peace to finally flow freely. Rest now, with a heart wide open, allowing the true stillness to extend and anchor you completely. The moon in the water, the illusion of the fixed self. We now turn our attention to the most subtle and pervasive source of human anxiety, the tenacious illusion of the fixed, permanent self. This concept, known in the Buddhist tradition as anatta or non-self, is often the most difficult to grasp, yet its realization is the key to dissolving the deeply ingrained fear of loss, failure, and ultimate non-existence. The ego, that ceaseless architect of our worries, is built upon the faulty foundation that there is a solid, enduring I, a permanent entity that must be protected, validated, and defended at all costs. Zen masters use the exquisite metaphor of the moon in the water to illustrate this truth. The moon's reflection is perfectly clear and bright in the still pond, appearing utterly real, yet it possesses no independent substance. It is entirely dependent on the light of the moon and the stillness of the water. When the water is disturbed, the reflection shatters, but the moon in the sky remains perfectly whole. The self we cling to is precisely like that reflection, a beautiful, dynamic, but ultimately unreal collection of passing phenomena. In a small fishing village by the great inland sea, a young man named Akio lived a life defined by his relentless attachment to his own identity. Akio was a skilled carpenter, renowned throughout the village for his meticulous craftsmanship. His entire sense of worth, his peace, and his happiness were inextricably tied to his tools, his reputation, and the physical evidence of his perfect, unwavering skill. Akio was terrified of failure, terrified of criticism, and most of all, terrified of change. He believed that if his hands became shaky, or his eyesight blurred, or his reputation was tarnished, his self, the solid, worthy Akio, would cease to exist. His striving was therefore not for the joy of creation, but for the desperate, anxious defense of a fragile, constructed identity. He had built a beautiful house, but he lived in constant fear that the wind would blow it down. He sought counsel from an old hermit, Zen master named Rinzai, who lived on a tiny rocky island in the bay. Rinzai was famous for his effortless, joyful demeanor, seemingly untouched by the constant turmoil of the sea and the world. Akio rowed out to the island on a clear, still evening. He found Rinzai sitting on a rock, watching the perfect reflection of the moon on the water. Akio bowed. "Master Rinzai," he said, his voice tight with the strain of his striving. "I am tormented by myself. I work to create things of beauty, but the moment I finish, I am driven to the next task. I fear to rest, because if I rest, I feel my skills will fade, and my carefully constructed reputation will vanish. I am trapped in a constant cycle of doing, driven by the need to prove that I am a worthy, permanent self. How can I find rest when the self I seek to protect is always slipping through my fingers?" Rinzai did not look at the carpenter, but simply gestured toward the water with a slow, deliberate movement. "Akio, look at the moon's reflection," the master said, his voice soft, like the sound of the gentle tide. "Is the reflection real?" "It is not real, master. It has no substance. It is only light and water." "And yet," Rinzai continued, "does it not appear perfectly clear? Does it not shine with beauty? And if you take a small stone and toss it into the water, what happens to the reflection?" Akio watched as Rinzai tossed a pebble near the reflection. The image immediately shattered into 1,000 dancing pieces, utterly distorted, and then slowly reformed as the water stilled. "The reflection shatters, master, but the true moon in the sky remains whole and undisturbed." Akio replied, beginning to see the shape of the teaching. "Exactly," Rinzai confirmed. "Yourself, Akio, the carpenter, the skilled one, the admired one, is precisely like that reflection. It is composed of 5 aggregates: your body, your feelings, your perceptions, your mental formations, and your consciousness. These are known as the skandhas. They are all dynamic, flowing, and transient. They change with every breath, every emotion, and every perception. There is no permanent, fixed I to be found within this flow." The master looked at Akio, his gaze piercing the carpenter's rigid sense of self. "You are exhausted, Akio, because you are trying to desperately hold the water still, believing that the reflection will vanish forever, if you rest. But the moment the self you seek to protect is seen as a collection of transient processes, a beautiful flowing reflection, it loses its power to torment you. You realize that there is no fixed permanent akio that can be destroyed by failure, criticism, or even death. The akio you fear losing is the moon in the water. Rinzai then offered the liberating truth of anatta. The profound peace of the enlightened one is not found in possessing the self, but in realizing that there is no self to possess. There is only the vast, boundless sky of awareness, which contains the whole moon, your true nature, and is entirely unaffected by the ripples on the surface of the water, the transient, momentary self. The practice of anatta is the practice of gently dismantling the ego's anxiety by observing the flow of the 5 skandhas. Akio spent the next week on the island, his mind now turned toward a subtle, profound observation. When he felt a moment of pride in his skill, he did not cling to it as proof of his worth. He simply observed the feeling arising and dissolving. This is a feeling of satisfaction. It is not the self. When he felt a momentary flicker of fear about his future, he did not succumb to the panic. He simply observed the mental formation arising and dissolving. This is a transient projection. It is not the self. He began to see that his body was simply a collection of matter, changing and aging. His emotions were simply transient feelings moving through. His thoughts were only ephemeral formations, appearing and disappearing in the vastness of his consciousness. The fear that had driven his striving began to dissolve, replaced by a profound lightness. He realized that the self he had been so desperately trying to protect was the very thing that had been causing all his anxiety and exhaustion. When the belief in the fixed self vanished, the anxiety that clung to it vanished too. Akio returned to his village, but he was no longer the same carpenter. He still worked with immense skill, but the quality of his effort was fundamentally changed. The frantic striving and defensive perfectionism were gone, replaced by a joyful, non-attached flow, the state of wu-wei. He worked not to defend his identity, but for the sheer, effortless pleasure of creation in the present moment. He no longer feared the ripples of change, for he knew that the true, essential moon of his awareness remained whole. Tonight, as you drift further into rest, let the subtle, profound truth of non-self settle deep within you. Feel the final lingering anxiety of your day. The worry about what you said or what you must do, or who you are perceived to be. And now, gently, profoundly, ask yourself the liberating question. Who is it that is worried? Is it a fixed, permanent I? Or is it merely a transient collection of a few anxious thoughts, a fleeting feeling of fear, a temporary sensation in the body, all reflections on the surface of the water? Do not cling to the reflection. Do not fear its shattering. Relax your grip entirely on the illusion of the fixed self. Rest now in the vast, boundless truth of the sky itself, knowing that your true, essential nature is whole, complete, and utterly untouchable by the ephemeral ripples of the world. Let the anxiety of the ego dissolve and sink into the peaceful, effortless non-existence of the true self. The silent mountain, the practice of deep presence, the illusion of the fixed self, now gently seen for what it is, a mere reflection on the water, begins to clear the way for the most direct and essential Zen practice, deep presence. This practice is the act of resting the mind unwaveringly in the absolute stillness of the present moment, free from the burdens of history and the anxieties of projection. It is the realization that this very breath, this specific sensation, this singular now, is the only moment of life that truly exists, and therefore the only true refuge. This unwavering presence is known as Zazen, seated meditation, but the true practice of Zazen is not merely a physical posture. It is a state of mindful, non-judgmental attention that can be carried into every moment, transforming ordinary reality into sacred, profound stillness. In a deep valley, shrouded by the vast, silent Haida Mountains, stood a small temple where the only landmark was a massive, ancient, moss-covered stone known as the Silent Mountain. This stone had stood there for millennia, utterly immobile, utterly indifferent to the ceaseless change of the world around it, the rush of the mountain stream, the violence of winter storms, the slow decay of the surrounding forest. Here lived the Master Tenzin, whose reputation for profound, unshakable stillness drew seekers from across the land. But Tenzin's stillness was not cold or distant. It was a vibrant, deep repose, like the inner heat of the mountain itself. A nervous modern seeker named Hideo, who worked in the frantic capital city, arrived at the temple, driven by a life of chronic, low-level anxiety. Hideo's mind was a perpetual motion machine, constantly planning the next step, analyzing the last mistake, and rarely resting in the current reality. His sleep was shallow, his days were rushed, and his body was knotted with tension. Hideo bowed before Master Tenzin, who was simply sitting, doing nothing, yet radiating an enormous gravity of peace. "Master," Hideo whispered, exhausted by his journey and his life. "I have read every treatise on mindfulness. I know I must be present, but my mind is a runaway horse. Every time I try to anchor it in the present, it immediately bolts, either galloping back into the pasture of regret or rushing forward into the uncertain landscape of worry. I cannot stop thinking. How can I possibly find the deep, stabilizing refuge of the present moment when the present moment feels so fragile and fleeting?" Tenzin smiled and gestured toward the colossal stone outside the window. The silent mountain. "Tell me, Hideo," the master asked, his voice low and steady. "What is the difference between that stone and your mind?" Hideo searched for the appropriate philosophical answer. "The stone is matter, master. My mind is thought. The stone is immobile, and my mind is ceaselessly moving." "Ah," Tenzan said gently, "you have grasped the surface difference, but now find the essential similarity. What is the unshakable truth shared by both the moving mind and the motionless stone?" Hideo struggled with this new koan, similarity. Tenzin offered the liberating pointer. The stone rests in its own reality. It is utterly complete in its stoneness. It does not strive to be a cloud, nor does it regret not being a tree. It simply is, perfectly, unreservedly, here. Your mind, Hideo, must learn this same effortless state of being. The moment you try to force your mind to be still, you split the reality of the present moment. You create a duality, the mind that is striving for stillness, and the stillness that is being pursued. This striving is the exhausting effort that keeps you from rest. The master then explained the essence of the practice. When you sit in zazen, you are not sitting to stop thinking. You are sitting to become the silent mountain of awareness. The thoughts, the regrets, and the worries are merely the wind and the clouds passing around the stone. The clouds do not affect the stone's essential nature. The wind cannot move its mass. Your true refuge is not what you are thinking, but the vast silent space in which the thinking occurs. This space is the now. It is always present. It is never fleeting. It is the only moment of reality that is not merely a projection of memory or anticipation. Tenzan gave Hideo a simple, non-striving instruction for his practice. Go and sit by the stream near the silent mountain. Do not try to stop the thoughts, for that is a battle you cannot win. Instead, shift your attention entirely to the solidity of the breath. Let the in-breath and the out-breath become your anchor, the only truth in the universe. Do not try to control the breath. Simply witness its gentle, effortless arrival and departure. Let the rhythm of your breath be the sound of the vast, quiet earth rotating in its own perfection. Hideo went to the stream and sat, facing the colossal stone. For the first hour, his mind was a storm of noise, a torrent of anxieties about his abandoned city life, his work, and his family. He tried, out of old habit, to push the thoughts away, and immediately felt the familiar tension return to his chest. Then he remembered the master's words. "You are the silent mountain of awareness." He stopped fighting. He gently, profoundly surrendered his attention to the breath. In, out. Not a long breath, not a short breath, but the breath that was already happening. He began to feel the breath not as a concept, but as a pure physical reality. The sensation of cool air entering his nostrils, the expansion and softening of his abdomen, the feeling of the warm air departing. He placed his entire being, the whole of his awareness, on the narrow, immediate reality of that sensation. The thoughts did not stop flowing, but Hideo no longer followed them. They became like the rush of the mountain stream beside him, a constant, beautiful, but utterly separate sound. He was the mountain. They were the stream. He realized that the thoughts were not him. In the sustained, non-judgmental attention to the now, Hideo felt a profound, unprecedented shift. The anxiety, which was always about what might happen or what did happen, had no fuel in the present moment. It dissolved. When he was completely present with the sensation of the breath, there was simply peace and the fact of being. He realized that the peace he sought was not a special reward for stopping his thoughts. It was the default state that was revealed when the striving, time-obsessed mind finally took a pause from its relentless work of creating the past and the future. This deep presence is the ultimate refuge for the weary heart. The burden of life is not in the present moment, but in the relentless journey the mind forces you to take away from the present moment. When you return to the simple, humble reality of this breath, all the massive, overwhelming weight of your life shrinks down to the small, manageable task of simply being here now. As you drift now toward deep, healing rest, allow the wisdom of the silent mountain to become the foundation of your awareness. Feel the support of your bed beneath you. This is the solidity of the mountain. Feel the gentle, effortless rhythm of your own breathing. This is the anchor in the now. You do not need to solve the problems of tomorrow. You do not need to change the story of yesterday. All that is required is the gentle, profound commitment to this moment of rest. Surrender entirely to the simple, beautiful, single fact of your presence. Let the worries become the harmless, distant wind. You are the silent mountain. You are here. You are whole. Rest in the timeless, unshakable stability of the now. The art of graceful release, letting go of regret and fear, having found temporary refuge in the stability of the present moment. We can now address the two great thieves of deep rest: regret and fear. Regret is the mind's anxious attachment to the past, a relentless wish that what was could have been different. Fear is the mind's anxious projection into the future, a constant worry about what will be and whether we will be capable of meeting it. Both are pure, destructive illusions that hold the striving ego captive, preventing the peaceful surrender required for deep sleep. The path of Zen is not about denying the reality of the past or the future, but about the profound, graceful art of release, letting go of the grip of that which is no longer, and that which is not yet. In the southern province of Shikoku, known for its arduous pilgrimage route, lived a venerable Zen master named Kosen. Kosen's unique wisdom was that he had completely given up the practice of remembering his own past failures or successes, and had equally given up the practice of planning his future. He lived with an absolute, light-hearted freedom in the now. A young, brilliant scholar named Hiroki came to the master, weighed down by the burden of his own history. Hiroki was consumed by the memory of a profound mistake he had made in his youth, a moment of youthful arrogance that had cost him a cherished opportunity. He could not forgive himself. Every night, the memory returned, a relentless, painful film loop that robbed him of sleep and peace. Hiroki bowed before Kosen, his eyes sunken with chronic exhaustion. "Master Kosen," he pleaded, "my past is a lead weight tied around my neck. I cannot let go of the mistakes I made 5 years ago. I know I cannot change the past, but the self-judgment is incessant, and because I am so burdened by the past, I cannot face the future, for I am terrified I will repeat the same errors. I live between a crushing regret and a debilitating fear. How do I cut the cord that ties me to a history that no longer exists?" Kosen, who was trimming a bonsai tree with quiet, non-striving precision, did not immediately answer. He finished his cut and then gently placed the delicate shears on the table. "Hiroki," the master asked, "tell me, who is the self that regrets the mistake?" "It is I, master, the self who made the error." "And where is that self now?" Hiroki paused, feeling the profound stillness of the master's presence. "He is here, master, but he is older, wiser, and now deeply ashamed." "But is he truly the same self?" Kosen pressed gently. "The self who made the mistake 5 years ago. Did that self possess the wisdom you have gained from the suffering of those 5 years? Did that self possess the shame, the remorse, and the deep, refined understanding that sits before me today?" "No, master," Hiroki admitted, his voice softening. "That self was ignorant of the consequences. Then the self who made the mistake is gone," Kosen concluded simply. "He vanished the moment the consequence became clear. The self who sits here now is a new self, a wiser self, forged by the very fire of the mistake. Your regret is merely a form of attachment to a dead identity, the desperate clinging of the present self to a past self that no longer exists." This was the core teaching on the release of regret. The painful attachment is not to the event, which is merely a fixed point in history, but to the identity of the person who committed the mistake. by clinging to the identity of the flawed self or the mistaken self. The mind forces you to relive the anxiety, robbing the present self of its clarity and rest. Kosen then turned his attention to the second thief, fear. Now turn your mind to the future, Hiroki. Tell me of your fear. What exactly are you afraid of? I am afraid of failure, Master. I am afraid that the next project, the next journey, the next decision will be fraught with error. I am afraid of the suffering I have not yet encountered. And where is this future you fear? Kosen asked. It has not arrived, Master. It is only a few hours, days, or months away. And what is the only moment of life you can truly live in? The present, Master. Kosen pointed to a small, worn leather bag lying beside his cushion. This bag, Hiroki, is empty. But if you spend the entire day worrying about the stone that might be placed in the bag tomorrow, you will carry the weight of that worry, even though the bag is empty in your hands right now. Fear is the self carrying the imagined weight of a tomorrow that has not yet arrived. The master picked up the shears again and held them carefully. The deepest truth of Zen is this: you cannot control the outcome of the future, but you have absolute profound control over the quality of your attention in the present moment. If you bring a non-striving, fully present awareness to the task of this breath, this walk, this meal, then the best possible outcome is already being forged, because the quality of the cause, your attention, is perfect. The art of graceful release, Kosen concluded, is the simple, profound act of non-resistance. Let the past be the past. It is an unchangeable history, now just a story to inform the present self. Let the future be the future. It is an unknowable space that can only be met with the clarity and peace of the present moment. He gave Hiroki a final, powerful instruction for rest. When you lie down tonight, imagine you are standing at the edge of a great, silent river. In one hand, you hold the bundle of all your regrets, the stories of yesterday. In the other, you hold the bundle of all your fears, the projected worries of tomorrow. Now, simply open your hands. Do not throw the bundles in with force. Simply allow them to gently fall into the current. Watch them drift away, shrinking until they disappear from sight. Hiroki returned home, and that night performed the master's instruction. He lay down and consciously, profoundly opened his hands. He watched the memory of his past mistake, that sharp, painful knot of regret, gently slip into the silent river of his imagination. He watched the massive, shapeless fear of his future, the worry of repeating error, gently release from his grasp. As the two burdens floated away, he felt an unprecedented, absolute lightness. He realized that the vast majority of his exhaustion had not been caused by the demands of his life, but by the relentless invisible effort of holding on to the two things that did not exist, the past and the future. When the self is utterly present, there is only life, here and now. The self that regrets is gone. The self that fears is not yet here. Only the peaceful, light, and perfectly complete self of the now remains. Tonight, as you settle, take a moment to acknowledge the heavy bundles you may still be carrying. The regret of an unsaid word. The fear of an uncertain event. Breathe deeply into this moment. Feel the reality of your body resting. This moment is the only one you possess. And now, with a profound final act of grace, release your grip. Let the past be silent. Let the future remain unwritten. Let the self that strives to hold them both finally rest in the perfect, light-hearted freedom of the present, the empty boat and the ferryman's wisdom, ego and conflict. The path to deep, continuous rest is rarely disturbed by great, sudden tragedies. It is most often eroded by the ceaseless, small friction of conflict in our relationships. This conflict, whether internal or external, arises almost entirely from the ego's powerful, yet fragile, need to be right, to be acknowledged, and to be separate. The Zen masters offer the profound metaphor of the empty boat to illustrate the ultimate freedom found in relinquishing the ego's insistence on a fixed self and the resulting conflict with others. The wisdom is simple. When there is no I standing behind the action, there is no one left to be offended, and therefore no conflict can take root. Imagine the Yangtze River, vast and ceaselessly flowing. A monk named Sotatsu lived in a small, isolated hut on the bank, where he spent his days in quiet meditation and contemplative reflection. Sotatsu's inner stillness was profound, but he was often disturbed by the noise and arguments of the ferrymen who worked the river, constantly jostling for the best position, shouting criticisms and insults at one another. One day, Sotatsu decided to row his small boat out to the middle of the river for a more isolated, silent meditation. As he sat, eyes closed, profoundly absorbed in the stillness of his breath, he felt a sudden sharp thump against his boat. His meditation was violently broken. Sotatsu's mind, the quiet, disciplined mind of the seasoned seeker, immediately reacted with anger and judgment. How dare they? He thought. After all my discipline, all my effort for peace, some reckless, clumsy idiot has ruined my practice. He opened his eyes, ready to unleash a torrent of righteous, long-held frustration onto the perpetrator. He turned, fully prepared to confront the other vessel, only to find that the boat that had struck his was completely empty. It was a small, unmoored fishing skiff, having drifted gently downriver with the current, pushed only by the subtle, indifferent flow of the water. There was no pilot, no person, and no conscious intention behind the bump. It was simply an event, a boat hitting a boat. Sotatsu stared at the empty vessel, the confrontation he had prepared in his mind. The accusations, the demanding of apologies, the fierce defense of his shattered peace suddenly became absurd, hollow, and meaningless. Who was he to yell at? The wood, the water, the flow of the river. The tension that had instantly coiled in his chest and jaw dissolved into a sudden, deep laugh. The realization was profound and immediate. Since there was no one in the other boat, there was no anger in Sotatsu. He realized that his intense anger had not been caused by the event of the bump, but by the story he had instantly constructed around the event. A careless person intentionally ruined my meditation. The anger was not aimed at the bump, but at the ego of the imaginary culprit he had created. If the boat was empty, the event was purely mechanical, merely the universe in motion. The moment the personal self vanished from the interaction, the moment he saw the boat as merely wood and water, his own ego's need to defend, judge, and be angry also instantly vanished. This realization became Sotatsu's final, essential teaching. He understood that virtually all conflict and friction in human life follows this same pattern. Whenever you feel hurt, insulted, criticized, or disrupted, your mind instantly assumes there is a conscious, malicious pilot, a deliberate, intentful ego in the other person's boat. You react to the imagined intention, not the simple, neutral event. But the Zen wisdom asks us to perceive others as empty boats, driven not by a malicious, conscious pilot, but by the impersonal, often clumsy, forces of their own skandhas. Their momentary feelings, their historical conditioning, their anxieties, and their fears. The hurtful word spoken by a colleague is not a deliberate strike from a malicious self. It is merely the sound of their own unmanaged fear or exhaustion being pushed by the current of their stress. The careless action of a loved one that breaks your peace is not a conscious act of disregard. It is often the sound of their own overthinking or non-presence bumping against your own. When you practice seeing others as empty boats, something profound happens to your own reactivity. You realize that there is no one to forgive and no one to fight. You stop taking the event personally. You stop constructing the narrative of the malicious enemy. When Sotatsu returned to the bank, he no longer heard the ferryman's arguments with the same anxious withdrawal. He heard their shouting not as a personal assault on his peace, but as the loud, clumsy sound of two empty boats banging together, pushed by the current of their respective egos and anxieties. He was able to be present, observant, and completely at rest amidst the noise, because his own ego had stopped entering the arena. This practice offers the most sustainable rest for the mind because it resolves the exhausting, persistent friction of living with others. The moment you release the insistence that the world and the people in it must conform to your conditions for peace, the moment you release the need for others to have a conscious, perfect pilot in their boat, you find immediate, unshakable freedom. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet, feel the gentle wisdom of the empty boat settling over your consciousness. Think of any small conflict, any minor friction, or any lingering resentment from your day. Imagine the person involved, and then gently release the idea of their fixed, malicious, or intentional self. See them as a beautifully complex but ultimately empty vessel being driven by the current of their own impersonal conditions, their exhaustion, their fear, their old habits of thought. Do not ask them to change. Do not ask them to apologize. Simply remove the imaginary pilot from their boat. When the other boat is empty, your own boat, your own inner stillness, can finally be completely at ease. There is no one to blame, no one to fight, and no one to resist. Rest now, with a heart free from the burdens of conflict, in the profound, non-dualistic realization that all beings are merely empty boats drifting on the vast, indifferent river of life. Let the friction dissolve and sink into the silent, perfect rest of non-resistance, the farmer's wisdom, acceptance, and effortless being. In the final profound phase of cultivating inner rest, we encounter the ultimate teaching on acceptance. This is the liberation that comes from realizing that true freedom is not the ability to control external events, but the profound power to completely control our response to them. The anxious mind constantly seeks to label events as good or bad, clinging to the good and fighting the bad, thereby generating a ceaseless, exhausting cycle of emotional attachment. Acceptance is the deep, non-reactive realization that everything, at its core, is simply what is. This profound wisdom is embodied in the timeless parable of the Zen farmer. In a small, remote village, far from the concerns of the capital, lived an old farmer. He was simply known as the farmer, and his life was a simple, repetitive rhythm of working his modest land, rising with the sun and sleeping with the dark. He owned a magnificent, powerful stallion, famous throughout the region for its strength and beauty. One morning, the farmer awoke to find that his gate had been left unsecured, and the prize stallion had galloped away into the wild hills. The villagers gathered at his small cottage, their faces heavy with shared grief for his immense loss. "Oh, what terrible luck!" one neighbor exclaimed, shaking his head. "This is a disaster. How will you work your fields now? Such a profound misfortune. The farmer, a man of deep, unshakable stillness, simply looked at the man, shrugged, and offered a calm, non-judgmental response that became the central teaching of his life. He simply said, "Maybe." The villagers were astonished by his indifference, but they eventually returned to their own lives. A week later, the magnificent stallion returned to the farmer's pasture. But he was not alone. He had brought with him an entire herd of beautiful wild horses, captured from the remote mountains. The farmer's wealth and future had suddenly increased tenfold, and he was now the richest man in the village. Again, the villagers rushed to his cottage, their faces now bright with joy. "Oh, what miraculous fortune!" another neighbor cried, full of effusive praise. "You are the luckiest man alive. This is a tremendous blessing." The farmer simply looked at the woman, smiled gently, and offered his same calm, non-judgmental response. "Maybe." The villagers, though confused, celebrated his immense good fortune. The very next day, the farmer's only son, attempting to break one of the new wild horses, was thrown violently and broke his leg, a break so severe it left him crippled and unable to work in the fields for the rest of his life. Once more, the villagers converged upon the cottage, their faces drawn with pity and despair. "Oh, what cruel, devastating misfortune," a neighbor lamented, weeping for the young man's ruined future. "Your only son, your only labor. This is truly the worst of luck." The farmer, tending to his son's wound with quiet, non-reactive care, looked up and for the third time offered his simple, profound word of radical acceptance. "Maybe." A month later, the armies of the distant emperor swept through the land, demanding that every able-bodied young man be immediately conscripted into the army to fight in a far-off, brutal, and deadly war. All the young men of the village were taken, never to be seen again. But the farmer's son, crippled by his previous injury, was left behind. He was safe. He was home. The villagers understood the profound truth of the farmer's simple wisdom. They came to him not with judgment, but with quiet, deep reverence. The farmer's wisdom lies in the realization that the mind's attempt to label an event as definitively good or bad is the root of all attachment and suffering. We only ever perceive a tiny fragment of the vast, intricate tapestry of cause and consequence. The great loss of today may be the very thing that saves your life tomorrow. The great gain of this season may carry the seeds of next season's profound difficulty. The practice of acceptance is the gentle, profound release of the need to judge. It is the non-reactive state of mind that allows the universe to unfold as it must, without the constant, exhausting friction of the ego trying to force a different reality. When the mind is caught in the cycle of judgment, this is bad, it must not be, it immediately creates resistance. This resistance is the source of inner tension, the constant low-level emotional striving that prevents deep rest. To accept is not to be passive or indifferent. It is to realize the ultimate non-controllability of external events, thereby freeing up all your energy for the single thing you can control: the quality of your presence in this moment. The farmer found his deep, effortless rest in this absolute non-resistance. He simply lived the event as it unfolded, without adding the heavy, unnecessary burden of his own emotional commentary and judgment. This night, as you prepare for the deepest sleep, allow the farmer's simple, powerful wisdom to settle over the events of your own life. Think of a challenging moment from your day, an irritation, a disappointment, or a conversation that did not go as planned. Your mind has likely already labeled it as bad or unfortunate, and this labeling is what keeps the tension alive in your body and mind. Now, gently, profoundly, apply the farmer's quiet question. Maybe the event you perceive as a failure today is simply a necessary redirection that will protect you from a greater error tomorrow. Maybe the disappointment you feel now is simply the fertile ground required for a wisdom you have not yet cultivated. Release the tight grip of your judgment. Stop the internal argument with reality. Let the event of your day simply be. Rest now in the deep, effortless peace that comes from surrendering the illusion of control. You do not need to fight, to strive, or to know the outcome. You only need to be fully, profoundly present with the simple, perfect reality of your body resting, your breath flowing, and your mind gently unwinding. The ultimate freedom is found not in seeking a perfect reality, but in accepting the profound, non-judgmental reality that is already here. The final rest. The 3 gentle truths. The journey is drawing to its close, and the long, quiet narrative of the Zen masters now gently dissipates into the boundless silence of the night. You have traveled the inner landscape of stillness, released the restless stone of striving, and allowed the light of non-dual reality to settle over your heart. Now, we gather the essence of all these teachings, the wisdom of the silent mountain and the empty boat, and distill them into a final, profound truth. The single soft light that illuminates the path to ultimate peace and the deepest, most restorative sleep. The vast ocean of Buddhist wisdom, when finally reduced to its simplest, most compassionate form, can be expressed in 3 fundamental truths. 3 quiet virtues that define a life lived in harmony with the way. These are the final keys to the gate of effortless being. How much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. Let us allow these three truths to settle over your consciousness now, one by one, like three soft waves washing over the quiet shore of your awareness. The first truth: how much you love to love, in the Zen sense, is not merely a fierce, demanding attachment to a person or an outcome. It is the deep, profound realization of non-separation. It is the boundless state of metta, the loving kindness that asks for nothing and flows outward, turning the isolated fortress of the striving ego into an endless, generous spring. Recall the lesson of the road of many candles, the realization that happiness never decreases by being shared. Your inner peace, your clarity, and your stillness are not fragile possessions to be guarded in isolation. They are fire, and their only purpose is to light the path for others. The moment you use your peace to gently acknowledge and validate the struggle of another human being, your own peace is not diminished. It is made impenetrable. You may have encountered friction in your day, a moment of sharp word, or unspoken resentment. Your body may still be holding the subtle tension of that small conflict. The wisdom of love asks you to release that tension now, not through force, but through generous re-perception. See the person who caused the friction, not as a deliberate assailant of your peace, but as an empty boat, a human being driven by the clumsy, impersonal currents of their own fear, exhaustion, or old conditioning. When you see them not as a fixed, malicious self, but as a temporary, struggling reflection, the wall of your own defensiveness dissolves. You realize that their suffering is the same fundamental dukkha that you yourself have worked so hard to quiet. Love is the ultimate act of non-duality. It is the final, essential surrender of the ego that insists, I am separate, I am right, I am whole, only when others are wrong. Let the vast, quiet space of your heart now expand beyond the confines of your own skin. Feel the breath of deep rest entering your being, and know that this rest is not a private luxury, but a boundless, shared truth. The more deeply you rest, the more profound the peace you radiate. The more fully you embrace the flaws of others, the more completely you forgive the flaws in yourself. Let the final measure of your life be the quiet, profound generosity of your attention, the capacity to truly see, truly hear, and truly acknowledge the struggling truth of another being, without demanding that they must be different for your own sake. This is the deep, unwavering rest of a heart that is no longer closed in defense, but wide open in boundless, non-striving acceptance. This openness is the only true fortress. Rest now in the gentle warmth of this universal connection. The second truth: how gently you lived. The exhaustion that clings to the body and mind is often not the result of hard work, but the consequence of internal friction. It is the ceaseless struggle of the striving self, trying to force life to obey its own rigid, often unrealistic will. To live gently is the practice of Wu Wei, effortless action, non-striving, and the humble acceptance of the flow. Recall the wisdom of the gate of no gate, the realization that the profound truth is found precisely within the most mundane, repetitive acts of your day. The peace you seek is not hidden in some distant spiritual achievement. It is already present in the simple act of breathing, in the quiet moment of resting your head upon the pillow, in the rhythmic beat of your heart. Gentleness is the act of removing the effort from your being. It is the commitment to Shenshu's era, to stop trying to constantly wipe the dust from the mirror. Your nature is already clear. Your path is already flowing. Your true self is already at rest. The effort to force rest is the only remaining disturbance. Think of the Zen farmer, whose only response to the loss of his horse, the gain of a herd, and the injury of his son was the simple, non-reactive word, maybe. This is the profound gentleness of a life lived without the heavy, exhausting weight of absolute judgment. When you cease to label every event as definitively good or bad, your mind stops constructing the walls of attachment and resistance, and you are free to simply flow with the current of existence. To live gently means to abandon the relentless habit of pushing against what is. It means allowing the regret of the past to simply be the quiet memory it is, without adding the tension of self-criticism. It means allowing the fear of the future to simply be the transient thought it is, without adding the tension of panic and planning. The Master Tenzin taught us to become the silent mountain, the thoughts that arise now, the final flicker of the day's tasks, the quiet noise of your consciousness. These are merely the wind and the clouds. You are the immovable, untouched presence that witnesses them. You do not argue with the wind. You do not try to rearrange the clouds. You simply allow them to pass, resting in the vast, effortless stability of your own awareness. Feel the profound gentleness of your breath now. It requires no force. It demands no effort. It is simply life, flowing in and out of your body with quiet, perfect necessity. Surrender your striving will to this gentle, ancient rhythm. Let the tension drain from your jaw, your shoulders, and your heart. Allow the greater quiet realization that you do not need to do anything more. You only need to be the effortless awareness that is already here. This is the profound healing rest that comes from living gently. The third truth, how gracefully you let go. The final essential key to liberation and deep rest is graceful release.
This is the art of letting go of things not meant for you. The deepest truth of the Zen path is that the things not meant for you include all that is ephemeral, all that is conditional, and most profoundly, the illusion of the fixed self. Recall the
moon in the water, the realization of anatta, or non-self. The persistent I you strive to protect, the one that worries about reputation, fears failure, and clings to success, is merely a reflection composed of transient elements. It is beautiful, dynamic, and necessary for the function of life, but it has no independent, solid existence. To try and hold on to that reflection is the source of all the ego's deepest fear and deepest exhaustion. Grace is the final, complete surrender of the mind's impossible task of holding the universe still. The most difficult things to let go of are not physical objects, but the internal stories we tell ourselves. The story of who I should have been, the story of how life should be, and the story of what tomorrow must contain. These stories, these expectations, are the ultimate things not meant for you, for they are rigid projections against the flowing reality of anicca, impermanence. To let go gracefully is to see the life you are living as the taste of the dewdrop, precious, crystalline, perfectly beautiful, and utterly ephemeral. You do not cling to the moment of its perfection. You honor its fleeting existence and allow it to return its essence to the indifferent air. You are now in the final moments of profound surrender, sinking into the vast, warm depths of your own consciousness. There is one last weight that the striving self may still be clinging to, the anxious tension of worry about tomorrow. Let that final worry become the bundles you cast into the silent river. Give up the fierce, exhausting effort to control the outcome of the days ahead. The quality of your attention now is the single, perfect preparation for what is to come. If you rest deeply, you are resting with clarity, and that clarity will rise with you in the morning. Grace is found in this moment of final, absolute trust. The trust that the natural flow of the universe is not your enemy, but the very source of your existence. The trust that to release your grip is not to fall into chaos, but to fall into the profound security of effortless being. Let go of the need to be the person who solves everything. Let go of the need to be the self who knows everything. Let go of the person who worries and strives. Sink now into the boundless, untouched, clear reality that lies beneath all effort, all fear, and all illusion. Feel the quiet stability of your body. Hear the soft, rhythmic sound of your breathing. Allow your entire consciousness to dissolve gently into the deep, dark rest of the silent night. Rest now, loved, gentle, and utterly free.